Great, thank you very much, Lynn, and good afternoon again, everybody. So I am providing the perspective from the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, or NIEHS, which is one of the 27 institutes and centers of the National Institutes of Health within the Department of Health and Human Services. So we are part of the biomedical research enterprise of the United States. That's where we come into this picture. We're unique in many ways within the NIH, not just because we're in North Carolina and everybody else is in Maryland, but also because we don't focus in on one organ system or one set of diseases or one issue. Environmental health is very broad, and our portfolio reflects the breadth of it, ranging from investigations at the molecular toxicological level to community epidemiology of a whole wide range of health impacts. We come into this, I think, through I'm going to refer to one of Lynn's slides. She mentioned the policy drivers of biofuels issues, and her top two policy drivers were the health impacts related to the air pollution that comes from burning fuels and the issues of greenhouse gases and global climate change and those impacts. So NIEHS primarily comes in to these discussions because we do the basic science that would inform the impact assessments, that would inform the broader sustainability assessments in some ways by looking at the health impacts of different kinds of choices. Our core mission really is research. 40% of our $800 or so million budget goes to funding investigator-initiated research and centers research in institutions outside of NIEHS. In our extramural program, about a third of it is given to intramural labs, which are looking at a lot of primarily molecular toxicological questions, as well as some substantial epidemiology studies. So within those areas of research, certainly we have a long history of air pollution research. We have funded many of the studies, the fundamental air pollution studies that inform current risk assessment models. We continue to look at an ever-widening range of health impacts. So that's a core area which has been our strength and will, I think, continue to be an area where we'll contribute. The area of climate change impacts is a relatively new one for NIEHS. We led the NIH in the development of a pilot funding program for the last 3 years to start to build the community of health researchers. And I mention this in particular, and I say this with some humility, sitting next to Chris Portier, who was fundamental in helping to establish this at NIEHS and to create this framework. But one of the things that's important about our climate change impact research program is that it focuses not just on what happens from changes in weather, precipitation, and climate, but it also explicitly includes the health implications of measures taken to either mitigate climate change by reducing greenhouse gases or to adapt to climate change impacts. And how do those measures, whether they be changes in fuel combustion, changes in housing, et cetera, how do those impact health? So out of the 14 or so grants that are being funded right now in our climate change program, there are 2 that are looking at these kinds of implications of climate change policy. One looking at the health implications of air conditioning use and increasing air conditioning use in the Midwest. The other looking at changes in housing insulation and housing stock, and what are the implications of that for heat stress and heat mortality. So this is not an area, the area of secondary impacts of adopting biofuels. It's not an area that's currently funded, but I just want to say that this is the kind of program where that kind of an application coming from the outside would be welcomed, and that there is an opening. That particular funding opportunity is closed, but we're hoping in future years we will have new opportunities related to that. The second thing I would mention is the National Toxicology Program. NIEHS is a bit of a chimera. It has multiple components which have very disparate sources of funding, which I won't go into the details, but a big part of us is the National Toxicology Program, whose mission is to support the EPA and FDA and other agencies in kind of gold standard toxicologic investigations, the development of new methods, et cetera. And so one area that is just worth mentioning that is the kind of thing that could play into this is a new research program on polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. This is something that has been coming for a while. Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons are a complex mixture. They're, of course, part of the petroleum side of the fuel industry. The recent Deepwater Horizon spill was a motivation. There's been some scientific motivations for this. So this is the kind of thing that the National Toxicology Program could be taking on, is looking at specific components of any aspect of biofuels, whether it's additives to enhance their performance in engines or some of the, if there were to be unique emissions themselves. And then the last thing that I would mention in terms of the role of NIEHS in these kind of debates is from a budgetary standpoint, we invest most of our money in fundamental research and funding the scientists and the investigators around the world. But we also have a very important research translation mission. And the support of this roundtable is one of the manifestations of this. We believe that the best science and the best decisions are made when we bring our science to forums like this in open discussion to inform those who are making those decisions. And one of the things that we have been working on is translating this kind of activity on a global scale. We have a global environmental health program, and one of the things that we're supporting is an innovation collaborative in conjunction with the roundtable that is creating this kind of exchange, looking at sustainable development, the decisions that are made around the world in terms of energy policy, agricultural policy, and economic development, and how environmental health plays a role in those, or sometimes doesn't play the role it should, and how do we create the frameworks, the basic science, the indicators and metrics, the surveillance and evaluation kinds of programs that can allow sustainable development decisions to be made properly informed by environmental health science. Our research translation activities are very important to the Institute and hopefully are contributing to making these decisions better informed in the future. So I'll stop there and go on to Chris.